we all have some behavior that we would like to change about ourselves. And we certainly all want to help someone else change their behavior in a positive way. So maybe it's your kid, your spouse, your colleague. So I want to share some new research with you that I think reveals something really important about what gets people to change their behavior. But before I do that, let's zoom in on one strategy that I think you probably use a lot. So let's say you're trying to stop yourself from snacking. What do you tell yourself? Well, most people's inner monologue will say, "Beware, you'll be fat." And if this was your kid, you would probably tell him that smoking kills. And by the way, he's in big, big trouble. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to scare ourselves and others into changing their behavior. And it's not just us. Warnings and threats are really common in health campaigns, in policy. It's because we all share this deep-rooted belief that if you threaten people, if fear is induced, it will get them to act. And it seems like a really reasonable assumption, except for the fact that the science shows that warnings have very limited impact on behavior. So, graphic images on cigarette packets, for example, do not deter smokers from smoking. And one study found that after looking at those images, quitting actually became a lower priority for smokers. So I'm not saying that warnings and threats never work, but what I'm saying is that, on average, they seem to have a very limited impact. And so the question is why? Why are we resistant to warnings? Well, if you think about animals, when you induce fear in an animal, the most common response you will see is freezing or fleeing. Fighting, not as much. And so humans are the same. So if something scares us, we tend to shut down and we try to eliminate the negative feelings. So we might use rationalization. So for example, you might tell yourself, "My grandpa smoked. He lived to be 90. So I have really good genes and absolutely nothing to worry about." And this process can actually make you feel more resilient than you did before. Which is why warnings sometimes have this boomerang effect. And other times we simply put our head in the ground. Take the stock market, for example. Do you know when people pull their head out of the ground to look at their accounts? Not to make a transaction, just to log in to check their account. So what you're seeing here in black is the S&P 500 over 2 years. And in gray is a number of times that people logged into their account just to check. And this is data from Coulston, Lowenstein, and Seppi. It's controlled for all the obvious confounds. So what do we see? So when the market is high, people log in all the time because positive information makes you feel good, so you seek it out. And when the market is low, people avoid logging in because negative information makes us feel bad, so we try to avoid it altogether. And all this is true as long as bad information can reasonably be avoided. So what you don't see here is what happened a few months later in the financial collapse of 2008, when the market went drastically down. And that's when people started logging in frantically. But it was a bit too late. So you can think about it like this. It's not just finance in many different parts of our life. We have warning signs and bad behaviors now, and they could potentially lead to all these bad outcomes later, but not necessarily so. Because there's different routes from your present to your future, right? It can go this way, it can go that way. And as time passes, you gather more and more information about where the wind is blowing. And at any point, you can intervene and you could potentially change the outcome. But that takes energy. And you might tell yourself, well, what's the point about worrying about something that might happen? It might not happen until we reach this point, at which time you do jump into action, but sometimes it's a little bit too late. So we wanted to know in my lab what type of information does leak into people. So we conducted an experiment where we asked approximately 100 people to estimate the likely